Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's briefing, Justice at a Cost, Rethinking Fines, Fees, and Justice in Alabama. My name is Anisha Hardy, and I am your moderator for this evening, and I am honored to be with you tonight as part of this Alabama Values ongoing Justice in Focus narrative series. Justice in Focus is a collaborative initiative that focuses on reimagining public safety and creating equitable solutions for all. Our partners include the Beacon Center, the Alabama Justice Initiative, and Flourish, Alabama. Tonight, we're here to discuss an issue that weighs heavily on so many in our communities, and that is the crushing burden of fines and fees in our justice system. Now, these financial penalties don't just disrupt lives, they literally trap families in cycles of poverty, criminalize the poor, and oftentimes just really hinder the trust in the very system that is meant to ensure fairness and safety. And so, this is a justice issue, it is a human issue, it is a community issue, and we cannot afford to look away. And as with so many challenges, this one intersects deeply with systemic inequities, with race and class, and I think the impact is felt in some of our most vulnerable communities. And so I am excited. We are fortunate to have an incredible panel of speakers who bring a very diverse perspective and expertise to this issue. We have Judge Tiffany McCord, District Judge for Alabama's 15th Judicial Circuit, who sees firsthand the barriers that individuals face in the system. We have Aaliyah McKee, Director of the Chief Public Defender Office for Montgomery County, who advocates for those disproportionately impacted by the justice system. And then we have Pastor Richard Williams, the founder of the Beacon Center and the director of the Next Steps program, who works to support those affected by these systemic challenges. Each of these leaders bring invaluable insight to the table, and I am excited for us to just really dive into this discussion and this conversation. And so I thank everyone for being here. And I just want to remind those who are tuning in that we will have a Q&A portion at the end of our discussion. So I'd invite the community to drop your questions in the comment section of whatever platform you are viewing from. So let's dive right in. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Pastor Richard. So look, as a faith leader and founder of the Beacon Center and the director of the Next Steps program, you have seen how deeply, fines and fees, impact individuals and families in our communities. I think, your work through the Next Steps program has really been a lifeline for many. Could you share for folks who might not be aware of what we mean by fines and fees or justice at a cost, could you share how these financial penalties contribute to cycles of poverty and how your program helps the most, affected by this?
Yeah, first I want to start off by saying good evening, and I'm just so grateful to be here. I'm grateful for Alabama Values and for this opportunity to be with this star-studded panel. That my two co-panelists are amazing at their work, and I'm grateful that we have this time to be together. Diving right into the question in space, what I've seen and what we've been able to witness and what we know is that the area of fees and fines produce and create a cycle of not only poverty, but we also see a level of escalation that happens when individuals have an inability to pay. Particularly in the Beacon Center, we are so grateful for the opportunity to serve in the Next Steps program, which is an organization and a program that provides supportive services to those individuals who are in the court system, as well as those who are seeking alternate sentencing or those who may be early release. And so what we notice is that as individuals who are in a vulnerable population, when they have an intersection with justice, that's normally not a day of celebration. That is not a day that is celebrated upon, but it's normally a day that has a cost. And so what we've seen is that cost happens not only from loss of employment, but we see that there's a cost that happens by how much it costs to be in the justice system. And what we notice is that individuals are not aware of that cost and that the system requires them to pay and to participate in that system. And so there's a host of those fees that individual will be charged that will just be there because it's how the system works. One example of those, to make it very real to those in our audience and those who will view this, is that very recently we had someone who had their first arrest. They had never been arrested before. They went to first call. They went before Judge McCord, and after they went before Judge McCord, what we discussed with them is that they said that the bondsman told them, "We'll see you soon." And so the mother said, I really didn't understand why the bondsman said I would see you soon. She said she had decided to make the weekly payment herself, and they were going to do that digitally. And she didn't understand that she was going to be seen again. Well, that was because that their case was eventually going to be indicted, and they didn't understand that they were going to have to be bonded out again. Right? There was another set that was going to happen in that space. And so what we noticed is that when they had to revisit that bondsman again, they were going to have to spend more additional funds. Now, those may not be funds that would be allocated toward the fees and fines process that we would see within the court system. But what we do understand is that that's an additional cost that the individual would have to pay. And as the cycle continues, what we see is our benefit is to provide the wraparound resources to the individual, right? Like that's our sweet spot. The law is not our sweet spot. Understanding all of these nuances in the court system, that's not our sweet spot. But it's about supporting our neighbors as they're going through the system and finding out how they can be the best version of themselves to be able to walk through the justice system.
Yeah. So, Richard, like just really quickly in the sense of like what does that look like in a practical sense, all right, if you can kind of walk us through like the next step program, which I'm a huge fan of, and I think when we talk about reimagining, what public safety looks like and reimagining our role in helping others, can you give someone an example of like what walking through that next steps program looks like?
Yeah, so it looks like a person experiencing an arrest. Normally, they are incarcerated at the time. For those who are arrested who come through that lane, we say there's multiple lanes to reach us. And so from there, a judge is able to have discretion, and they're really doing an assessment. Which we had to learn about that, right? They're trying to assess what is the best for this individual, but also what is the best for the community, and how do we continue to keep the community safe in the midst of this court process as it starts. And so an individual is assigned to us. We then do an intake process with the individual. One of our staff members sits down with them after they've left the courthouse, they've got their clothes, and they're out in the land, and they come to our conference room or one of our offices, and someone sits down with them and says, "Hey, you're here. What's going on? How can we walk alongside with you?" And so in that moment, that's where we may hear things of individuals sharing that, I may have been arrested for this, but I'm struggling with this. We hear about maybe things around drug and detox support needing. We may find an individual needs groceries, right? They need to have access to literally just food in their refrigerator. Or someone may say that they need support and employment. And so as we do that intake process, we're gathering this information, and then we prepare them for them to start their Tuesday night classes. In their Tuesday night classes, we believe in the Next Steps program that every person is a leader. And so an individual is able to go through a leadership development course, and where we have trained staff persons who are walking with them. And they're walking through around things around financial management. They're walking around things of how do we regulate our relationships. Sometimes we find that individuals have difficulties because they don't have barriers or boundaries in their relationships. And so we move in different spaces if those boundaries are healthy and they're placed in a space. And so after that experience of walking through class, simultaneously, they have access to therapy. Everyone within the Next Steps program, including our staff, we all have a therapist, and they're able to see a therapist at no cost to them. And we're very thankful for that. And that's because of the generous donors and the grants and different things that we are able to acquire that allow neighbors to be able to walk through that space. And simultaneously, while they're going through that programming, we simultaneously provide that same support to their family members as well, individuals who are in their household. And so it becomes this holistic approach where individuals are walking in community. They're coming on Tuesday night where childcare, there's a dinner that's available. We're telling them to gather around the dinner table. And as they gather around the table, there are individuals who are there who are listening. And they're listening in a space so that someone can be heard. And to be honest, if there was something that would have to say, what is the secret sauce of the Nexus space, is that we're listening. right? We're listening to our neighbors. And so as they go through, they walk through those weeks. It's a 6 month journey. And at the end of the journey, we are always so grateful to be able to celebrate them in graduation. And that's just a short snippet of what happens throughout those weeks.
Yeah, no, thank you. As I said before, like this is a human issue. It is a community issue. And I think with that being said, it's going to be a collective community solution, right? So thank you so much for sharing just how the Next Step programs provides like, just hope and tangible solutions for individuals caught in these cycles. And with that, I would love to turn to Judge McCord. Thank you so much for joining us. I think as a district judge, you have a front row seat to some of the financial burdens placed on individuals navigating the system through a legal lens. And I think it would be interesting to hear your perspective and what you've seen. And with your perspective, like what practical steps can a judge, if any, take within the existing system to address these issues?
So I don't want to have the narrative that I believe or that anybody believes that the court system wholesale is a financial system. Um, that everyone who comes into contact with the court systems will have a financial burden, or that burden may lead them to, or their financial consequence to whatever wrongful act that they're convicted of will lead them to a life of poverty. Is there the opportunity for that to happen? Absolutely. Is there the opportunity for if you are racing on the interstate and you get a ticket and you're found guilty of that ticket, for to have to pay that ticket to hurt your pockets or hurt how you take care of your family? Absolutely. But the court system is set up to be a deterrent from committing crimes. It is not set up to be a place where people lose their jobs. It's not set up to be a place where people are unhoused because they have to pay fines and court costs. And so, what I see from my perspective is day to day judges trying to find solutions and ways to, one, make sure people understand that crime does not pay and that you should not be out here committing crimes and trying to keep the community safe. But two, also make sure that if it is something that is minor or minimal, that it is not a financial burden to an individual that is so great that it outweighs whatever punitive consequence that comes with that crime. And so I think we want people to know or to understand that you can ask for your fines and court costs to be remitted. We want people to know and to understand that you can ask to do community service instead of paying fines and court costs. Now, Alabama law is very clear that there's some things that we can't remit. We can't remit restitution. If you have stolen something or caused someone damage through a criminal act and there's an amount owed to that person restitution, we can't remit that. We can't even give you community service for that, but that's Alabama law. But for everything else, I see judges trying every day to make the justice system just, to make it fair. And it is an absolute balancing act. And I find that people have difficulties answering the tough questions about their finances in an open forum. Um, and it's embarrassing to say that my water is off
Mm.
and full of a courtroom of 50 people. It's embarrassing to say that my lights are off. It's embarrassing to say that I didn't even have gas money to get to court, or I walked to court, or it's embarrassing to say I don't know how to feed my children. But the only way that the courts can help them with that is if they talk to us and they tell us. And I don't want people to come into the courts feeling like they cannot be open about their struggles,
Mm.
because that's why we're there. We're there. The Next Steps program was born out of the courts being sensitive to the struggle and the plight of the people that it serves. We are not there simply to punish. We're there for justice, and justice doesn't always mean punishment. Justice sometimes means the Next Step program. Justice sometimes means community service. Justice sometimes means you go home and we'll see you when we see you, and we're going to remit your fines and court costs and pray that you don't come back before us. And I wanted to correct something, and I forget sometimes that I do not have a poker face. Reverend Williams, if someone is having to bond out again, that's wrong. Because we have a continuing bond that if they bond out before they're indicted, they shouldn't have to bond out again unless the bond amount changes. And we try to do everything in our power to make sure that bond amount doesn't change so they don't have to bond out again. And so if bonding companies are saying to people that if you get indicted, you're going to have to bond out again and their bond is exactly the same, they're cheating the people. And the people need to know that, because that is not how the court system works. If you bond out for $40,000 before you're indicted and you come out and you're indicted, your bond is still $40,000. That same $40,000 bond that you started with works just fine. You don't have to do it over. And so that is, I hate that the people who are designed to help the people are taking advantage of the people. That is not how the court system is designed. And it leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. And they feel like justice isn't in the courthouse if the people who are not actually associated or part of the justice system, but claim to be, are then taking advantage of the people who have to interact with the justice system. I tell people all the time that whatever your bonding company says, doesn't really matter in court because they're not court personnel. It is what you get in a court order, not what a bondsman says. So if you get a court order that says you have court, then you show up. If your bondsman tells you don't show up because you have a court order.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that. And I think, Judge McCord, I often say that knowledge is power. And oftentimes, one way to keep groups disempowered is to create barriers to knowledge, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And I think, even in your response, I was taking notes at some things because Justice in Focus is also, we do educational things as well. And you were dropping a lot of knowledge about options that people have, or even how you just kind of raised the flag about the bond with Richard. And if there, I'm wondering, kind of how the Next Steps program was born out of the courts. Is there a centralized or accessible space where folks can get this information about the alternative options that's available for them?
So we do have that centralized and accessible space. It's called the Public Defender's Office. And to be perfectly honest, they grew out of the court systems wanting to make sure and advocating for the people. The court systems asked for a public defender's office. They wanted an expert, someone who was dedicated. Their everyday work and lifeblood was built on taking care of folks who could not afford an attorney. And it wasn't the people who asked for it, it was the courts who asked for it. And they have all that knowledge. They are frequently advocating for fines and court costs to be remitted, or fines and court costs to be reduced, or there not to be any court costs, that there not be a fine. And the courts are open to all of those arguments. We welcome all of those arguments of having, we just want you to lay out the foundation for it. If you can lay out the foundation, we can grant it.
I love it. I love it. And with that, I think that is a good segue. Thank you so much, Judge McCord. And I think that's a good segue into, Aaliyah's role as the Montgomery's chief public defender. I think, you work closely with the people. You've seen, how people are often impacted by the system or could use information, right, to help them navigate. So could you share specific examples, and what strategies your office used to mitigate, any burdens, and how you support those that are most impacted?
Sure. One of the biggest impacts on an individual that's involved in the criminal justice system definitely comes prior to them facing their right to decide to go to trial is absolutely some financial burdens that originally starts in a case with their potential bail amounts. If they are detained and have to free themselves by way of a bondsman, as Pastor Williams mentioned, and so aptly as discussed by Judge McCord. But the hardships on the back end can sometimes be something that can create a cycle of debt that continues someone in the cycle if they are unable to pay. Some of the biggest, I think, troubles with the determination of fines is the failure to provide information about an individual's ability to pay. And that falls squarely with defense counsel in providing that information. Gathering the amount of social history and personal information about someone's background is extremely important in determining what's going to be fair in the imposition of a particular sentence in a case, whether that is a traffic ticket up to something as serious that may require someone to serve a term of imprisonment. Fines and fees find themselves attached to cases on the back end of even prison sentences. So individuals, these are things that follow them and carry along for years to come. Things, even individuals who find themselves in a probation period, for example, who may have been able to comply with every other aspect of probation, may still have hanging over their head for a period or a term of years a penalty that is fines and fees involved and connected to a particular case. Those particular fines and fees have led to individuals that have created a financial strain. It directly affects someone's ability to take care of their family. Many of the individuals that we serve and who find themselves involved in the criminal justice system have a responsibility to family that they have to take care of. And that's not just a matter of being present, but also a financial obligation. And these fines and fees can really cut into that. We've seen it impact individuals not having an ability to afford transportation, which ultimately ends up affecting their employment opportunities, their ability to maintain the employment that they have. Financial restraints can also sometimes be a barrier to participation in even some of the programs that may be available to individuals in the court system. Certain even diversionary programs that require a fee in order to participate, even for first-time offenders. So these fines and fees can have an impact on someone's ability for what alternatives to incarceration are available, alternative sentencings. They directly affect their families. And it really comes down to a matter of ultimately having some impact on increased recidivism rates as a result of that cycle of the debt and an inability sometimes to maintain that employment. But still, the need and desire to take care of family always exists.
Yeah, I want to jump in. Attorney McKee, I think you mentioned something that I believe that we've seen just great success in, is that one of the benefits of the Next Steps program is that there's not a fee, right? There's not a participation fee for someone to participate in. And so when we talk about these particular burdens that exist, that's one reason why I'm grateful that the court has given us this space, right? Like this space that we are able to walk alongside of our neighbors in such a great way. And so we've seen individuals who couldn't afford to come to court, like they got dropped off, had to walk up the street. But then for us to be able to see 6 months down the road where an individual is employed, they're working full time, they're able to be responsible for their family and things of that nature. I mean, I think that, there are some ways that I've been able to see how the Next Steps program has been able to walk alongside with individuals in the midst of the backdrop, right? And I think it's almost one of those things where you talk about lemons, right? Like the question is, and I remember that old adage being taught as a child that, when you get lemons, you need to make lemonade. And sometimes individuals don't have the sugar, right? They don't have the sugar nor the water to make the lemonade. But I feel like the Next Steps program is able to help our neighbors find the water, right? And have them do the work to be able to find the sugar, to be able to get that lemonade going. And so I just wanted to hop in there just so that those who are listening are able to see that in the midst of this backdrop, we are able to pull back the onion at times, right? We are able to have those moments of successes, those shining lights to be able to do the work.
And there's a big problem with that. And the big problem with that is that the Next Steps program is only in Montgomery County. There are not programs like that throughout the state of Alabama. And there should be, because The success rate of the Next Step program is fabulous. You see, as a judge, I see people who enter the program kicking and screaming, literally.
Wow.
And at the end of the program, they're thanking me for sending them.
Wow.
Their growth is so great. Their appreciation for being able to talk about real issues, real trauma, and to get someone who's not going to be there to judge. We don't, what's the Facebook, the Instagram thing? We don't judge. We don't, whatever. They don't judge.
I
They
don't know. I don't know that one, and I usually know them all.
It's a new trend. It's a new trend that's happening now.
We don't judge. We don't question. They don't judge, but they do question.
Yeah.
They question them about how to make the better choices, and how to grow from the experience that they're currently in, and how not to let the experience that they're in be a pattern or be something that holds them back from what their true dreams are. And that is the overwhelming issue that I see with the Next Step program, is that there's not enough. I would say also that recently I've been getting letters from people in jail who don't want to get out of jail and have tickets. And so they're writing me asking that they plead guilty to their ticket and that their fines and court costs be commuted to jail time. And so by the time they get out of jail, there's no warrants for them. There's no anything for them. They are done. And they can walk out of jail starting a new life. We literally went through everyone in the county jail this summer, and to see if there were tickets or warrants, and to make sure that people weren't just sitting over there languishing and still had unpaid tickets that they could come into court and resolve. Once they were released from jail, they would not have to somehow end up back into the jail because those warrants weren't served. And I think we just need to do more work, especially when we know that we have a captive audience, to make sure when they get out, they're ready to soar versus ready to fail.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, what does that look like, right? Like, how can we better involve and engage those directly impacted in shaping these solutions, right? Like, what does that look like from our end? I
Having
know.
the conversations, having the meetings. I think since you are a group who really cares about these type issues, talk to other folks who like, talk to your legislatures. Marika Coleman did a wonderful bill maybe 2 years ago, where it changed how we were able to, whether or not we were able to, one, suspend someone's license for failing to appear, and two, whether or not we can issue warrants for failing to appear. And it changed how folks who were charged with misdemeanors and charged with traffic violations, that you wouldn't automatically have your license suspended if you didn't show up on your first court date, that you wouldn't automatically have a warrant issued for you if you didn't show up for your court date, which, if you got your license suspended, that impacted how you fed your family, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were going back and forth to work, it affected whether you can go back and forth to school. So there's legislation that there's a group of legislators, and I say all of them, who really care about people, right? And talking to them to get legislation, because we are the interpreters of the legislation. We are the doers and the carry outers of the legislation. So some of it has to start there. And then of the things that we already have, for them to be used wholesale, to have the conversations with the jurors across the state about what are reasonable things to do when it relates to court costs and fines. How can we lessen the burden on those who may be unhoused? How can we not cause justice to cost, right? Cost to a point that is unequal to the crime committed. And so having those real conversations, I think, it's time for those. Someone had a great conversation with Marika Coleman, or I'm sure Marika, she's an attorney. She saw it for herself and came up with the legislation, but she would be a great partner for you. I can't hear you.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. No, I was saying thank you for that. And I think, that makes me think of, Richard, like the work that, your organization does, a lot of our partners, just what specific maybe potential legislative reforms, or like as we have those conversations, could Alabama champion, that can lead the way in creating a more equitable approach to, fines and fees, or as I would say in Justice in Focus, if we used our imagination, like what could reimagining that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I didn't know how much I didn't know until I entered the courthouse.
Yeah.
I like to think of myself as an individual that has some sense of awareness, but I did not know how much of my information about court was informed by Law and Order and TV shows. This is a real trans. I've never said this publicly. But this is hot off the press. So much of what I thought was based off of TV shows that I had seen over, the years of my life. I didn't, I remember NYPD. I mean, all these different shows, and that's all that I had, right? I had no idea that a first call even existed. I remember the first time we were told to go to first call, I remember grabbing my phone because we were told, hey, you need to get the first call. And I said, oh, next steps is about to happen. And I was like, okay, the program is going. We're going to first call. And they said I could bring my cell phone with me. And so literally I had my cell phone because I was like, we're going to have the first call and then I'm going to be able to respond. Now, to all of those who are attorneys and judges and all their experience, they know that a first call is the first appearance after someone has been arrested. That is their right, and they are able to see a judge, and they are not just held or arrested based off whatever the police officer told them. The first call is where they can have whatever they were arrested for read. I mean, there's a lot of different things that can happen in that moment, but I didn't know that's what a first call was. I didn't have a class. There wasn't a coloring book growing up that told me to color in, what a first call looks like, right? And so that knowledge base is not there. And so I think there has to be real work to be done for not only the system to be explained, but once the system is explained, I believe then people can then have an opinion about what needs to happen and what things need to happen next. And so I'll just never forget the first call I went to, and it had nothing to do with a cell phone. I mean, nothing. Attorney McKee, it had nothing. Nobody had a phone. Nobody was making a phone call. It was nothing about that at all. And so I think those are just those nuances that we all have to learn together.
I'd like to see a town hall on what is court and how do you show up for it.
We can definitely make that happen. I think that's a great idea.
What to expect when expecting a court date.
Now, I've seen Attorney McKee. You've done something like that before. Because I remember I feel like we were in the library doing something like that.
We did. We had an opportunity to speak with the community and answer some questions about the entire system, the steps in the system and what they could expect, and what individuals actually face and how the community can be involved in those different steps in the process. It was extremely informative. We got to answer questions from the community, but it demonstrated that there was, despite the level of involvement, and there were varied levels in the audience from community members, from those who volunteer, from those who just are avid news watchers, and involved in some local organizations. But the questions were very informative to let it be clear that I think additional education about our system and affecting how the fines and fees impact our community are really something that would be useful. One thing I think is helpful in Montgomery is, the consideration of our court with fines and fees, the defendant's ability to pay. You mentioned some legislative actions that may be helpful. Policies that would consider defendants' ability to pay in these considerations, which I can say is not a big problem here in Montgomery because we have judges who understand the issue. And when these issues are presented to our judges, they take into consideration an individual's income, and that factors in, and we see that in the resulting fines and fees that are imposed, or maybe even in fact in those cases when they're not imposed for that very reason, because of someone's inability to pay. But there's having something definitive in the law that would extremely, and cover that. And we have that now, but just an actual consideration for that, some specifics. There's an assessment for determining someone's ability to afford counsel. There is no form or type assessment to determine someone's ability to pay fines. And so that comes solely from the information as self-reported by individuals who are involved in the criminal justice system. And the better, I think, informed our court is and the impact, as well as our community, they can back some legislation to understand that creates a more fair system and actually, I think, a safer community for all involved.
And I think Judge McCord mentioned it earlier, where she shared about the level of shame that exists from sharing that information in the public space. And the reason why I want to have a moment on that is that what is being asked of individuals is something that individuals do on a daily, don't do in their daily work. You have to be honest, and you have to disclose what individuals normally are hiding. I have not found any individual who openly tells you that the reason why I do this, the reason why I do that, the reason why I park my car at the back of this place or the back of that place is because I don't want you to see that I'm living in my car, right? The individuals literally work to hide that so that they can literally have some sense of dignity. And one of the things that we've had to do is we've had to create those safe spaces where we tell individuals, I'm not going to tell anyone. And to know that individuals have literally asked, will you please not put this on social media? And part of that is an indictment to the work that nonprofits have done that has been harmful. Nonprofits that have put individuals' faces, who have told stories and placed names and images where individuals have felt that, their dignity has been removed in the way of this nonprofit complex, right? That uses stories without permission and doesn't allow individuals to maintain their privacy in space. And so, those are just real factors that individuals are walking through and they're dealing with in the midst. And so I think that we have to be sensitive to what we're asking individuals to do. And that is one thing that I'm just so grateful. I've seen it in judge courtroom over and over again, where their immediate response has become defense or anger or all those things. And judge will say, oh, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay right here. You're going to be right there. Let's work through this. And one of those individuals just a couple of weeks ago literally shared that her water was off, that she was concerned about her kids. She had no employment. And literally, after all of those tears she cried up there near the stand, we went back to the hallway and we went and literally less than 72 hours to those utilities being cared for, that water being on, that electricity notice being able to stay on. And that's not the story for everyone, right? But that is an opportunity, right? When we're able to create that level of honesty, because I think so often individuals are in a space where they don't feel they can be truthful.
Right. And it's whether they trust us. And that's the reality. The mark of a society and whether a society is on the incline or the decline is whether the people trust the systems and trust the government. And we want them to be able to trust the justice system, that if you share those things with us, that we won't use them to hurt you, but we are only there to help you. And I have to say that I'm not trying to hurt you, but I need to know how I can help you. And the only way I will know how I can help you is if you talk to me, if you share with me what's going on, so that we can get you on the track that I think you need to be on.
Yeah, no, and I think that's good. And I think acknowledging that the trust level may not be where it needs to be, and acknowledging the historical context as to why that may be, and also I think, what gives me hope is that we're having conversations like this. And so when we hear, like Judge McCord say, hey, like, I need you to trust me, like, I want to help. And I think that, again, it goes back to, this being a human issue, a community issue, and just bringing the humanity back into the space and how we address, these issues. So with that, we are coming up on our last question before we go to see if there are any questions in the comment section. And so I would love for each of you, as we close out our discussion, I would like each of you to share, a call to action for the community. Like I always say, that there is power in the collective, and oftentimes people don't see themselves as part of the, bringing about the change that they want to see, or being a part of the solution. And so, what can people do right now, those that are listening, to help address any issues caused by fines and fees, or whether it's getting involved locally, whether it's spreading knowledge of some of the gems that were dropped here this evening, or just supporting those that are directly impacted? Like, what are some ways? What would your call to action be through your perspective lens?
If I could address that, I think one thing, definitely the only way that we are able as defense counsel to really support indigent clients who face fines and fees is the amount of resources that are available to us, is some alternative to those fines and fees. So supporting organizations like Next Steps, and supporting judges who understand and appreciate the impact on the community that these fines and fees have as a totality, the impact on employment, the impact on driver's license, the impact to be able to return to court for matters, and how that directly impacts children and education in different ways, and families in the larger scope of things. And whether that's financial support, supporting individuals who support these kind of alternative programs and diversion programs in the court system. Because without programs like Next Steps and judges like Judge McCord and other judges in Montgomery County and the 15th Judicial Circuit who understand and appreciate the impact, and how an individual, regardless of their financial resource, can actually participate in Next Steps, because there is no financial obligation that becomes a barrier for their participation. But I think that absolutely boots on the ground support is a very easy step that could take place starting today.
I would say trust us to help, and that I am calling on the community to look at the court system differently. Don't see, and I know that I understand the climate and the culture and the times and the news stories in which we live in, right? But I also understand what I see daily. And what I see daily is judges trying their hardest to make sure justice is actually in the courthouse. And I get that there are verdicts that we don't like all across this nation. But I also know that there are a lot of verdicts that we love. I know that there are a lot of people who have been helped by the court systems. Trust us to allow us to help. Trust us to be the place to come to resolve issues and differences, because we can do that. We'd rather you resolve the differences in the courthouse than out on the streets. Trust us for that, and we will not disappoint you. Will we always get it 100% right? Absolutely not. No one's perfect, right? But we will try our hardest to ensure that we are fair and that we listen and that we try to get it right.
Okay, so as I think about a call to action, I think that it would not be it would be appropriate in this moment to share that I believe that you should support the Beacon Center and you should support the Next Steps program. I think I think I can do that, and I think that's okay to do that. And if it's wrong, I apologize. But I think that in ways of a call to action, I think we're in a stage, and just in transparency as an organization, I would love to be in every courtroom in the district court of Montgomery, Alabama. I would love to have every single courtroom in the circuit court, every time they start, that there's a person in the next steps. I even have a dream that they would have a next step blazer, and that you would be able to see the color of the blazer, and you would know that that is an individual that works for Next Steps. You would know that they were an advocate, and you would know that they would be someone that could at least tell you where the bathroom is and where the hallway is. And Attorney McKee, that they would even be able to help you get to the line to be able to drop your kids off so you can have childcare. I just literally believe that that day is possible. I believe that we have judges who believe in that level of society. I believe we have a community that is ready for that type of society. But what I do understand is that it requires a level of support. It requires us advocating when we see a program doing the right thing, right? As well as advocating when we see a program's doing the wrong thing. And that is one thing that I believe that I would call for those who are present today, is that they would find ways to connect, that they would find ways to serve, and also that they would even just take a visit and figure out the skills and gifts that they have, how those can be used by our neighbors so that everyone can move forward together.
I love that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think, we have some questions in the comment section. So we'll go ahead. We will kick off. The first one is from David Snyder. And David says, does it require a guilty plea to enter the Next Steps program? So I guess
it does not. Most people who enter the Next Step program in Montgomery County have not been adjudicated guilty. Most of them are at the very beginning of their walk within the justice system, and it is a way to mitigate their end.
Yes. And for folks who might not know what adjudicated means.
Found guilty.
Awesome. Yes. And let's see. The next question is from Chris Hardy. And it is, being that the community struggles with seeking that help, and I think this is in response to us saying, to ask for help. Is there a proactive way to present options to those that find themselves in need of support?
So what we do to be proactive is Pastor Williams is in the courtroom with us. That is our way of saying, and I'm digging. Trust me, I'm trying to get you help anytime you're in my courtroom. I'm trying, whatever you need, we're trying to get it for you. But we have him there because they may not seek them. We're gonna make you seek them. we're gonna steer you towards them. And he sometimes will stand up and interject, so we can get them to the help and the resources that they may need. So we get that people may not ask for it. That's why we're giving it free of charge.
And I want to chime in to family members, pastors, leaders, advocates. I think that one of the ways that you can be proactive in that space is that if you are asked to come into the space, sometimes that level of having someone to encourage, to be able to help the individual know that, hey, tell them this part, right? Like, I think that there's something about having that level of supportive space. And I know some pastors who have called. They've called me and said, hey, can you do X, Y, Z? And I said, well, what do they charge for? And they said, I don't know. It's just supposed to be this. And then we look it up on the computer and I say, did you know it was this? And they said, oh, no, I didn't know, right? And so that just shares that there's something in their relationship that they need to ask the next question, right? They need to know that it wasn't just a little trouble that was down the street. They need to be able to sit with that person and know that it wasn't going to be just a one-step movement.
Thank you. Let's see. We have another question from Destiny Williams. Okay, Destiny says the next steps is an excellent model. Shout out to you, Richard, and the team. Definitely needed across the state. Whereas Attorney McCord leads with compassion. What can we do to ensure that more restorative justice practices are integrated across Alabama's court system to promote healing and reconciliation in our communities?
So I think we have those loud conversations about who we are. I think Alabama has to decide who we are as a people when it comes to our justice system. Are we here for reconciliation? Are we here to restore, or are we here just to punish? And when we have those conversations, I think Alabama will decide that we do want to restore people. I see things like there is a whole place that they have in Perry County that is designed just for folks who are coming out of jail, to make sure that they've had mental health treatment, make sure they've had drug treatment, to give them a skill. And then they have people waiting in the wings to hire them, as soon as they're finished with the program. We need more of those programs, because we have such a wealth of talent that's being untapped. And so we need to allow people to live in their potential. And once we have these loud conversations, with the judicial branch, we need to have it with the legislative and the executive branch. And have clear agendas, what we really want to see. I think just having a conversation just to hear ourselves talk it's great if we have a podcast. But if we want to do the work, we have to have a clear agenda, clear plan that we want to press forward.
Yes. Awesome. So, in other words, I'm also hearing, definitely the town hall is definitely on my radar and thinking about how can we package that and make that accessible, but then just some educational things that need to happen. How do we close the knowledge gap to make sure people are informed on these resources, informed on how to not only navigate the system, but, like I said, the resources that's there. So with that, it is time for parting words. If you all have any before we go into our close for this evening, so I want to pause for any last parting words.
Well, okay, I'll start it off. I just want to thank Alabama Values, Justice in Focus team. It's been a privilege to be alongside of two other great organizations who are doing great work in the state of Alabama. I don't take it lightly that we are able to stand alongside with them, and Anisha and the entire Alabama Values team. Thank you for creating space. Thank you for holding space. And I believe that as we journey through this work together, I do believe that we can have a better Alabama together. I do believe that days can't be right. And I believe it starts with this level of dialogue and conversations. And to this work, I always like to say, and I always know to say, that I am thankful that our neighbors allow us to walk alongside with them.
Thank you.
Very beautiful, Richard.
Thank you.
Very beautiful. And I just want to say thank you for the invitation and having the conversation. I think when we have conversations about how we can use the power that we have and use it for the people and not against the people, that is a valuable conversation to have. And I hope that as we talk about fines and fees, and we talk about how the court system balances our role in it, that we get the help from organizations who want to pay off fines and court costs. We get the help from the organizations who want to pay medical debt. We're looking for folks who want to partner with the court system. We'll have the docket because there's a lot of medical debt out there and a lot of folks being sued for it. There's a lot of fines and court costs, and people need to get their driver's license. I wish I saw more clinics to help people get their driver's license so that they're driving legally, and it's not the cycle of driving while suspended, driving while suspended, driving while suspended. But I think everyone just needs to get off the sidelines and get about the work and get on the field, because we're better as a team versus individual entities.
Yes. No, thank you for that.
Yeah, I'd just like to take a moment to encourage, thank everybody for participating in this particular forum. Everyone who's been watching, you're taking the first steps to educate yourself on your local court system and how we do things here in Montgomery. It's an opportunity for a space for self-education to learn and kind of reframe how the court system deals with the people. The resources available really determine a lot of the alternative options that are available to defense counsel to be able to present on behalf of individuals. And it's extremely important, I think, for the participation of all citizens to find a space where they can support in some way their local court system, become educated, and as they know people in other jurisdictions, begin to share and talk about the programs that do work, like the Next Steps program, so these ideas can spawn in other places and hopefully grow throughout the state of Alabama. Because as much great work is being done here in Montgomery, there's a lot more space and room and more resources that we need for things like drug treatment, mental health, along with fines and fees. And those things go together in the court system, kind of dual issues that we deal with. And so spreading the word, becoming as educated as possible, and providing as much support, either with your hands, your word of mouth, or your financial support, is something that's definitely needed for programs in Montgomery and elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you. So, as we come to a close, I just want to thank each of you for your participation and your insight. And also your dedication in the work that you do. I think tonight's discussion really highlighted the interconnected challenges, but then also solutions, and just how we must center, justice, mutual aid, community well-being, and, that tackling these issues requires collaboration. It's going to require, as Judge McCourt would say, get off the sideline. It's going to require reforms. It's going to require a shared commitment to reimagining and creating a system that, that works for everyone. And, I think together that we have the ability to support programs like the Next Step program that reduces, impact. We have the ability to educate, our neighbors and our neighbor's neighbor, those communities that we're trusted messengers in. So to those watching, I urge you to stay engaged, start the conversation in your own circles. Support, your local community efforts, and every action counts. Your voice matters, and definitely stay connected with Justice in Focus by following Alabama Values on all social platforms at ALA Values. Also visit AVTV on YouTube at Alabamians to catch the other Justice in Focus briefings, where we touch on other topics such as paroles, also gun violence, and just stay connected also with the Beacon Center. And again, support the Next Steps program. And I thank you all so much again for being a part of this conversation. And let's continue reimagining justice and working together for a better future. Until next time, push forward.